almost every story has a theme. Really long books, however, are tough for us to use for practice. And so one of the best genres or types of literatures that we can use for practice are myths. In part because many myths are shorter, and so they present this complex idea about life in an interesting way, but they do it without us having to read hundreds of pages. But one of the other strongest points of myths are that they have been told and retold for thousands of years, because they're often the stories that have, since the ancient world, kind of pierced right to the heart of some of the most important topics in our lives. The dangers of pride, or the power of love, or the importance of honor. The ancient Greeks told stories about all of these to try and share their values with each other and with their children and with more. And so as we read these, I think they have really great examples of lessons to learn about life, and how even these sort of unrealistic stories can teach us about how we should live our very real lives. Happy birthday, by the way. The myth we're going to look at is Daedalus and his son Icarus. And you've probably heard about Icarus before. His name is often mentioned in all kinds of songs and stories and other types of texts. Take a moment, read this little yellow section on the screen, and think a little bit about how you might use that to fill in the chart that you have in your notes that looks like what's on the right-hand side. Pause the video now to read it through, think, and make some predictions in your head. You don't need to write it down yet. So when we consider the term myth, this is a genre of literature, so it's a type of story. In this case, it's a very traditional story. Many of these stretch back thousands of years. And as it says in the definition, and you can be writing this on your note paper that should be in your folder, the goal of myths are to try and answer some of these basic questions. Especially keep in mind that these were most popular during a time when science was far less developed. And so what we couldn't explain with knowledge, we explained through some of these myths. What we're supposed to remember is that they are often set in ancient times. Sometimes they talk about modern myths, but when you really think about a typical myth, they're from the ancient world, especially Greece and Rome. They usually feature characters who have supernatural abilities. So as I go through these, you'll want to jot down these key ideas on the left. They include events that could not necessarily happen in real life, oftentimes because of these characters, but sometimes the events themselves as well. And when you look beneath the surface, they show these values of the cultures who are telling the story. And so they often can reveal insights into these historical groups and civilizations. And really, this is almost like another way of defining a theme, because themes teach us about what we consider to be important, about lessons that we think we should know if we're going to live successful lives. So let's practice this once. Attached to your chart, I included this little half paper with the quick version of the myth of Theseus and the Minotaur. Take a moment, pause the video, and read that myth. Next, think about how you would use that myth to fill in the right-hand boxes of this chart. And so think about like one or two details that could fit in each of these boxes. If you'd like, you can write it down, but you are welcome to also just think it in your head and kind of find the examples fast. Pause the video now to do that. Here's what I was thinking. And again, you don't have to copy these, but what we're seeing is this ancient city-state of Crete under the rule of King Minos, that it includes this very unrealistic character, right? A minotaur that's half man and half bull and supernaturally strong. There are things that happen that couldn't be real in addition to that. And so an example is like this string of yarn that's able to weave its way all the way through this huge underground labyrinth, which is like a series of caves. But through those unrealistic events, they are teaching this more realistic lesson. And that's the idea of like the value of obedience. They were trying to teach people back then that, listening to your elders, listening to the leaders of the civilization was something that they thought was really important. They also talked a little bit about sacrifice, even though it was kind of extreme. So what we'll do in our upcoming lessons, not quite yet, is we'll read The Flight of Icarus, similar to how we read Arachne, except this will be in the textbook instead of the close reader, and we'll use that chart as a way to pull out some of the relevant details.